Panasonic just registered a third camera which indicates a Q1 2025 release. With 6 years since the announcement of the S1, S1R, and S1H, a refresh is long overdue. So why the holdup? Is Panasonic in trouble? Are they in crisis mode? Or is it a matter of resources? Or perhaps, did they rethink the camera to keep up with the competition? Well, I'll answer each of these questions in this video. But first, I have a simple request. Please subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything, helps this channel grow, and keeps you up to date on the latest camera gear, news, and rumors. Thanks to Chinese blogger E8M8888 for letting us know about a Panasonic registration that took part on December the 17th, 2024. The new camera has both Wi-Fi 2.4 and 5 GHz, so it's highly likely this is one of their high-end cameras, probably an S-series update. While the camera registration doesn't tell us any more information, what a registration does tell us is that an announcement usually takes place within 1 to 3 months of the announcement, and this is across all camera manufacturers. And yes, there are exceptions to this rule, but I think what we can expect at the very latest is an announcement in the first half of 2025, and all signs are, well, pointing towards a Q1 announcement. But this is only one of 3 cameras registered by Panasonic. So could we get an S1 II, S1R II, and an S1H II? Well, the S5 II was announced in January of last year. The GH7 was announced in early June 2024. And we just got an update 2 days ago of the G97 and the ZS99. On September the 26th, 2018, Panasonic announced the S1 and the S1R. That was over 6 years ago, and much has changed in the industry. We can't think of another camera in Panasonic's lineup in more need of an update. So that leads us to the obvious question. Why are we seeing such a holdup? Is Panasonic corporate having internal issues? Are they facing certain crises that could be impacting things? Sure, we know that's happening. Panasonic has been upfront about the challenges that they're facing, but it's not the only potential issue. Could Panasonic actually be rethinking what the S1, the S1R, and the S1H successor should actually be? Well, the S1 was actually due to be announced back in the first half of 2022, and it didn't happen. And that left the marketplace wondering, why? Where is the successor? There was no sign of anything. Well, at least up until now. According to a SobiNet source, Panasonic said that they're not quite satisfied with the specifications of the new camera and continue its subsequent development work, pointing towards the video specifications as being the holdup. Video specifications being the holdup? Could they be scrapping false colors for a more professional level EL zone? Or perhaps they saw the need for an AI processing chip like Sony did when they introduced it in the A7R5, or how Canon just released the Digic accelerator in the R5 Mark II, R1, and is rumored to be coming out in the R6 Mark III. Or maybe they decided to add internal ND filters, or perhaps, and this is just a perhaps here, they decided to rethink on not including 8K in the cameras. From 2022 until 2023, we've received quite a few conflicting and contradictory information about the specifications that we can expect to see in both the S1, the S1R, and the S1H successor. Some indicate that they're going to have somewhere around a 24 megapixel sensor, the same as the predecessors, while others are going to 34 or even way higher to much higher altitudes to 47 to 50 megapixels. Well, in late 2023, Panasonic provided an update at the Photo and Imaging event, once again in China, stating that the current popularity of 8K in the consumer market isn't enough. It will be released later. And after Panasonic said that, which they reinforced at several other events, leaked specifications for the S1 II and the S1H Mark II, well, they looked a little bit more like this. Maximum resolution of 6K video up to 60 frames per second, and 4K video, 6K oversampled up to 120 frames per second. And while some predicted 34 megapixels like this story at Photo Rumors, Others doubled down, stating 24 megapixels. At least until August, when another Panasonic executive was overheard saying this: Panasonic isn't satisfied with the specifications of the new camera and is continuing development work, such as the video specifications. The AsobiNet story goes further, stating that 8K 30 frames per second might be a compromise specifications to solve a problem. Unfortunately, the AsobiNet story didn't really state what the problem was, but they were indicating that it was more of a camera problem than an organization or financial problem or resource allocation. I think one of the potential issues could be heat management. If they're going to 8K up to 30 frames per second, 60 or even 120, as some rumors are now predicting, well, that would definitely generate an awful lot of heat. And I just recently picked up the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. I'm shooting with the Mark I currently. And for Canon to overcome the 8K 60 frames per second RAW, they added a new battery grip, a cooling grip, that actually takes air from obviously the outside and takes it internally into the camera, and then that vents out at the top here. And, you know, it works pretty well. Now, the camera will still overheat in certain situations, but with that cooling grip, you're going to be able to record for a whole lot longer. So it is possible that they could have had some architectural issues with heat management. The other potential problem is, well, maybe it's an architectural problem related to the new AI processing chip, the sensor, the image processor, all of that stuff working together and taking that data and moving it across the bus onto the storage. Again, the storage could be a challenge as well. All of that working together is definitely a problem. And there's something else as well. Doing that 8K oversampled 4K, while I think it's great, it works in the R1, the R5 Mark I, the R5 Mark II, but it definitely does generate a lot of heat, and in certain photo situations that can provide extra noise. But the last one, the last potential, let's call it challenge, could be market expectations. And market expectations require some rather aggressive capabilities that generate a huge amount of heat and require a significant amount of power. And going back to that AsobiNet article, Panasonic allegedly also said that more time needs to be spent on developing 120 frames per second. And this is where the translation breaks down. And actually, it's not so much the translation, it more has to do with grammar and particularly dealing with antecedents. When they're talking about more time is needed to develop the 120 frames per second, are they referring to 4K or 8K? Because quite a bit of time is spent talking about 8K, that it will have 8K up to 30 frames per second, 24, 25, and 30, all the basic frame rates. But another part goes on to talk about or speculate about 8K up to 60 frames per second and even 120 frames per second. And it's a little bit difficult based on the grammar and the story, the way it's put together, being in a foreign language and converting that, to understand whether the holdup is related to the specifications that they're trying to get from 8K or 4K. When Panasonic was planning the follow-up to these cameras, in early 2020, not a single stills hybrid camera had 8K. The Canon EOS R5 was the first camera to include 8K, and it provided 8K 24, 25, and 30 frames per second in RAW. Then came the Nikon Z9 providing 8K RAW as well, 8K up to 60 frames per second. Then a year later, we had the Nikon Z8 also doing 8K up to 60 frames per second. And then Fuji got into the game with the X-H2. Sony also started developing cameras with 8K, such as the Sony Alpha 1 and the Sony A7R5. And the list, well, it just keeps on growing. Panasonic was a pioneer in mirrorless camera development, delivering video-centric capabilities such as false colors, waveforms, vector scopes, and log profiles. And many of these capabilities were either added later on or enhanced through firmware updates, when the competition was just delivering minor bug fixes. But then Canon caught up with the EOS R5, delivering 8K RAW up to 30 frames per second, 4K up to 120 frames per second, Canon Log 1, and later in a firmware update, Canon Log 3, along with other enhancements to autofocus and heat management. The Nikon Z8 and Z9, well, they went further, delivering 8K RAW up to 60 frames per second, 4K up to 120 with Apple ProRes RAW, and false colors can be found in the Canon EOS R6, and waveforms in the EOS R5 Mark II. Panasonic bet that the marketplace wouldn't change that much. They didn't bet on Canon and Nikon stepping up the game and delivering video capabilities that leapfrogged the competition. Even Sony, that was the leader in video capabilities, delivering 4K video up to 30 or even 60 frames per second, was caught unaware of the Canon EOS R5, the Nikon Z8, Z9, and the recent update of the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. The marketplace has definitely changed, and all those features that were common with the GH series of cameras from the GH4, GH5, 6, and 7, as well as the S series, such as video, waveforms, vector scopes, log profiles, and firmware updates providing new and enhanced capabilities, well, we see that in Canon, Sony, and Nikon. I own the Canon EOS R5 for, well, over 4 years, and every couple of months Canon would release a new firmware update, fixing bugs but also providing major enhancements. And now I've got the EOS R5 Mark II. Why? Well, I was pretty happy with the Mark I, and what this does, Panasonic, are you listening? They gave me waveforms. I've got a battery cooling grip. I can deliver 8K up to 60 frames per second, 4K up to 120 frames per second, has a stacked sensor and an AI processing chip. It is impressive. So what what Panasonic has to do here is, yeah, they have to at the very least, match the competition. And what I think they have to do is part of this rethink of their video capabilities. They need to go a few steps further. Now, one thing we still don't see in cameras such as the Canon EOS R5 Mark II or the Nikon Z8 and Z9 is internal ND filters. And I'm not talking about electronic ND filters. I'm talking internal ND filters. That would be a huge, well, that would be something that Panasonic is offering that nobody else is. Now, to deliver 8K up to 120 frames per second, well, that would certainly capture the marketplace in offering the highest resolution and refresh rates. But again, if they can't do that without reducing the rolling shutter, or without, well, the bandwidth and detail, then it might be more of a gimmick. But if what this article is indicating is that Panasonic is now finally reaching for the stars again, then I think the S1, the S1R, or the S1H successor could be a rather impressive series of cameras. So, what do the latest leaked specifications look like? The latest leaked specifications once again come from a Sobinet's source in China. This camera is supposed to be able to deliver, or the S1, they're talking about the S1, although I'd say the S1H2 would also deliver this, and potentially the S1R as well. But remember, the S1R is more of a stills-focused camera. So video should be able to top out at 8K, 24, 25, and 30 frames per second. Now, there's a potential for 8K 60 and 8K 120, but let's just focus on 8K 30. But remember, the competition is really offering 8K 60 frames per second. 4K up to 120 frames per second. Now, the Canon EOS R5 Mark II does deliver 240 frames per second, but it's in 1080, and the quality is terrible. But again, it's useful in certain scenarios where the quality of the data that you're getting isn't nearly as important as it's capturing the action or something else. And in terms of log profiles, it's supposed to get, are you ready for this? The ARRI log C3. Yeah, that would be nice. You know what? When I first got the R5, this whole thing about log is like, yeah, you know, and I was younger, I was less experienced, and I thought, you know, what's the big deal about log profiles? It took me a while to figure them out using things such as zebras and waveforms, but once I figured that out, wow, and if you have the right log profile, such as Canon Log 2 for using Canon cameras, the results are incredible. But again, you need to really understand your exposure tools and use them to get really good results. But those results you definitely do get. So ARRI, Log C3, impressive, if true. And just like recent Sony cameras, the S1 will be getting an AI processing chip. And don't underestimate the potential of having its own AI processing chip. The Canon EOS R5 Mark II has one, and I got to tell you, the improvements to the autofocus system are significant. It's not about providing a faster autofocus system or a more accurate autofocus system, although the source does say it is going to be more accurate. What the AI processing chip allows you to do, at least with the Canon EOS R5 and the R1, is deliver this new action priority mode where you're better able to track the subject. Playing basketball, football, or soccer, it's able to lock onto the player's face of whomever has possession. And with their new face detect autofocus system, which they came out with 2 years ago in the S2, the S5 II and 2X, I'm really looking forward to this refresh. And you're going to be happy to hear this. Multiple sources are stating that it's going to have built-in ND filters, and it's not going to have an AA filter. Now, for some, that's a bit of an issue, but for a lot of people, that and open gate are kind of essentials. So, pretty impressive so far. Now, there's plenty of other rumors out there talking about many different things, including the sensor size. Here they didn't really talk, but the sensor size, well, they could deliver an image sensor with 34 megapixels and still deliver 8K. Now, when it comes to cameras such as the R5, the Mark I, and the Mark II, it's using a full-frame sensor that is 3:2 in an aspect ratio. So to be able to do 8K in those cameras, you need at least 39 megapixels for doing UHD and 44 megapixels for doing DCI. So to be able to do 34 megapixels and deliver 8K up to 30 frames per second, it would mean that they would have to use a different aspect ratio and a pixel pitch. With 3 cameras registered and a 6.5-year wait for a refresh of the S1, S1R, and S1H, if Panasonic doesn't deliver, well, at least 2 of these cameras in the first half of 2025, they're just going to keep bleeding customers. And every time I talk about a new camera, whether it's the R6 Mark III, the R5, or something Sony's coming out with, every now and then I get another comment from a Panasonic customer saying, yeah, I'm done. I'm switching to Nikon, Canon, or Sony. And it's frustrating because to me, Panasonic was the leader in the space when it came to video. The only problem that they had prevented them from getting mainstream acceptance was the pretty poor, and come on, you have to admit, pretty poor autofocus system. And I know you can shoot manual focus, but if you're a single person doing run and gun, manual focus just doesn't work. And it was terrible. It couldn't even do a frame where you had a single talking head taking up 35% of the frame. It would jump to the background. So with the new face detect autofocus system, that's been solved. We're just waiting, Panasonic. I know, it's Christmas in a few days, then it's New Year's, then it's CES. But starting with the second week of January, that's when we can expect to start hearing about new announcements from various camera companies, and we usually do. I think last year it was, well, Panasonic. Was it last year? See, no, it was 2 years ago. But we always hear something as early as the second week of January. I'm also expecting us to, well, maybe hear an announcement or two at or on the heels of CP+, which takes place in Yokohama, Japan, between February the 27th and March the 2nd. So I'm really hopeful that Panasonic does deliver. What do you think? Do you believe with my analysis and what I think are the reasons that are potentially holding up Panasonic? Do you think that they were developing a camera based on, well, what they were seeing in 2019 and 2020, and then completely caught off guard by the R5, and then the Nikon Z9 and Nikon Z8, and while these were cameras priced much higher than what they were aiming the S1 and the S1R and the S1H, we started to see specs come down in cameras such as the Fujifilm X-H2, delivering 8K at a much more affordable price point, right within the range of the S series. And then we saw other cameras such as the Nikon Z6 Mark III, delivering a quasi-stacked sensor with much faster readout speeds. Now, the competition has definitely caught up. So, is Panasonic going to go after this with better, higher resolution? Or are they going to go back to the roots and think like videographers, delivering capabilities that we usually see in very high-end cameras, such as ARRI? And I'm not saying the ARRI 35, it's going to compete with $30,000 cameras, $30,000 base cameras like the Red X and XL, but maybe do things such as internal ND filters, or maybe move to EL zone, because let's face this, while false colors is fine, whenever you're trying to match it up with other cameras or video sources, it's very difficult to, well, match things up, unlike EL zone, which has a very common sense way of looking at it. Middle gray is always in the middle, and if you're completely overexposed, it's white. Completely underexposed, it's black. And the colors, you can match it up against other devices. That's the next big thing I would love to see in upcoming cameras. I love waveforms, I love zebras, but EL Zone, it's been out for a while, but it just hasn't really been mainstream. And I think that's something that Panasonic can tackle that's, well, a big deal for cinematographers and videographers. Thank you so much for watching. Very much appreciated. Christmas is just in a couple of days, but Adorama and B&H have both announced that if you buy something today, they'll give you expedited shipping. And as I said in yesterday's videos, we're seeing some incredible deals. Now, a lot of Panasonic stuff is out of stock or on short order, so not a lot of deals there. But for Canon and Panasonic, or Canon and Sony and Nikon users, huge deals out there on, well, the R5 Mark I is $1,500 off compared to the R5 Mark II. That's really huge. The Nikon Z8 is $500 off. Various lenses, $500 off or more. A lot are on sale. And if you do purchase any of these, please consider using my affiliate links down below. These guys right here to Amazon.com, B&H, or Adorama, because it literally helps keep the lights on, and it's very much appreciated. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Have yourself a great day, a happy Christmas, happy New Year, and we'll see you again soon.